So today we're going to talk about what xenophobia is, how xenophobia plays out in this pandemic, and things you need to be looking out for to try to curtail and mitigate the xenophobia that's happening around us in our society. So when we talk about xenophobia, what we're talking about is the fear and hatred of people we have categorized as strangers or foreigners. And I should say that that's a fear and hatred we have societally modeled and ingrained in what we view as our country's culture. Because let's be honest, the United States doesn't necessarily have a country culture. It is an amalgamation of a lot of different things that is built in rhetoric. This xenophobia includes the fear or dislike of the customs, dress, food, etc. of people who are culturally different from oneself. In the case of the United States, it's kind of those things we societally deem un-American and things we view as not a part of American culture. And like I said, I use quotations with that because the United States as a country doesn't necessarily have a culture like other countries and regions of the world do. So let's be real. Xenophobia is an offshoot of racism. And xenophobia is racism driven by stereotypes, misinformation, miseducation, and nationalist rhetoric. And to be quite honest, it is currently exploding on a national level in very dangerous ways. Now, let me say that xenophobia is not just a white thing. Although it is perpetuated and amplified by white supremacist mindsets, and it is pushed most vehemently by white people in the United States, it is not just a white thing. The truth is that there is also power, privilege, and class attached to xenophobia. And persons of culture who view themselves as exemplifying the American ideal or who are misinformed and miseducated as well about other cultures can also be xenophobic. So if you think about it, a person of culture cannot necessarily be racist toward a white person. That would be more prejudice. But when it comes to other races that are non-white, a person of culture can be racist and can be xenophobic. So one of the things that's been going on in this country right now is a dramatic increase in hate crimes in the United States. As this pandemic has progressed with no immediate end in sight, reports of hate crimes in the United States as a whole have dramatically increased. But the reports of anti-Asian assaults, harassment, and hate crimes have erupted. And this has erupted after a 5-year decrease in anti-Asian hate crimes. And that's the saddest part of all of this. We were going in a different direction with the attacks and the harm toward our Asian and Pacific Islander colleagues, friends, and family. And now we're looking at a massive eruption. We're talking about an eruption that has happened in the span of an 8-week pandemic. Reports of hate crimes against the API community are averaging close to 100 reported incidents per day. And these are just the reported ones. We have no idea how many have not gone reported because of fear, because of feeling like they would not be heard, things of that nature. And according to data from the Oregon Department of Justice, in Oregon alone, reports of hate crimes and bias incidents have spiked 366%. Think of that number. And that's just in the last 8 weeks, basically. 366%. That's right here in our neck of the woods. So when we're talking about xenophobia, there's two things that white folks and persons of culture who benefit greatly from white privilege need to understand. First, it is a privilege, a white privilege, to not have to face hate and oppression due to the color of your skin or your perceived nationality or race. We can never forget that. If you get to walk through this world and not have to fear for pain, anguish, hate, and racism due to the color of your skin, then that is a white privilege. It is also a privilege, a white privilege, to be able to read about this happening, have it register as a concern in your mind. Not only is it a danger to you, but a danger to anyone you care for and communities of color as a whole. This is something that you have to keep in mind, because if you're able to see something about this on Facebook, hear someone talk about it in passing, have a moment where you're like, that's horrible, and then basically go on with your day like nothing has happened, that is legitimately a privilege, a white privilege. If you can even shelve it for the day, that is a white privilege. So, but if we're talking about xenophobia, there are some things that we can do about xenophobia during this pandemic for ourselves, for the communities that we care about, and for the people that we share space with. First and foremost, we need to be informed. You need to follow the latest information locally and nationally on the pandemic and its impact on marginalized groups and persons of culture. Know what the hate crime numbers are in your city and county. Like, I'll be honest, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you did not know that we were looking at 366% increase in API hate crimes in Oregon. That is figures and numbers that we need to know, mainly because we need to be informed enough to be able to see when these things are happening around us in our supermarkets, on our walks, when we're trying to exercise during this pandemic. These are things we all need to be accountable for. Another thing you need to do during this pandemic is step in and step up. Step in and support persons of culture and marginalized folks when you hear or see xenophobia and hate-based rhetoric in action. This includes in your workplace. So right now in your virtual meetings, your discussions, your quick chats, things of that nature, you need to be on it. And in your personal life for friends and family members. Like, if you got Bob at work and you got Uncle Bob at home and they both be tripping, you need to tell them that they're tripping. You cannot quit. You cannot stop talking about these things. The problem that we have, especially for people who have privilege, and especially for white folks with privilege, is that they don't want to get into it with Uncle Bob because Uncle Bob's supremely racist, xenophobic. Just that, oh, here goes Uncle Bob again. Or you have that person in your workplace who always says really horrific things about persons of color and marginalized folks. You have to call them out on these things. By not stepping in and supporting the folks of culture around you and the API community around you right now, you are contributing to the problem. Let me say, however, please note that this is not an invitation to cater to your white savior complex. This is also not a time for you to prove you deserve to be called an ally either. The label ally is earned through way more than you speaking up once or twice in a situation. I also want to note that expecting a person of culture or a marginalized person to thank you for doing something you should have been doing as a person with privilege anyway, and you want a pat on the back for it, it's not only white privilege, but it's also a window into your white fragility. And if you're a person of culture and you're expecting this pat on the back, you are dealing with some offshoots of your own white fragility and your connection to whiteness, and that's something you need to examine. And last but not least, what do you do about all of this during this pandemic? You do all of this post-pandemic as well. You get into the habit of doing all of the things I just said now. You stay consistent in your learning and growth in the aftermath of this pandemic. I know that a lot of folks want to talk about they want to go back to normal, and we don't have enough time to unpack how that impacts persons of culture and the API community and the way things are going in this country. There's a normalcy that we don't want. If you want a new normal, make this a part of your new normal and take action to support folks that are having to deal with xenophobia in this country. So that's all I got for y'all today. We only got 10 minutes, so we can't dive too deep into anything. But if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to have an open discussion about this for the time that we have left. And if you want to follow me on any of those social media channels, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Pharoah. Looks like we might have something in the Q&A. Jennifer wonders, what are examples of the more subtle xenophobia we should look for and call out?
A very solid example of the subtle xenophobia is people making comments about food. Like if you ever have a potluck at work and someone brings in food from their culture and people pick at it and they're like, oh, what's that? And they make fun of it, that's xenophobic. Because that means you're supremely uninformed, you're unwilling to accept someone else's culture, their food, their background. That is xenophobic. Other things that are xenophobic is when people make flippant comments about stereotypes that are connected to people. Like, for example, if they say something like, Jim comes into work late one day and you're like, those people, they're always late. That could have multiple connotations, but that is also supremely xenophobic when it's a person from another culture, because there might be a reason for them being late. I also think that when you look at from a management perspective, when you have managers who make statements about employees are hard to deal with, or I don't know how to talk to them, it's often women and persons of culture. And when it's persons of culture, it's usually people from other countries and other nationalities who immigrated to the United States. I've worked in multiple workplaces where people have basically said and done things of that nature that have made people supremely uncomfortable, and they don't know if they should report it. That is xenophobic, because you're basically pushing forward rhetoric that I'm difficult because you don't want to understand my culture. So those are some things that you should keep an eye out for.
Thank you. We have another question, which is, as white people or passing, how can we be allies to people of culture?
Well, that's a long form conversation, but I'll try to do the Cliff Notes version of that. The concept of allyship is a rough one, because people want to be called an ally, but they don't necessarily want to earn being an ally. Um, Allyship is doing this because you want to and not because you want people to think you're an awesome person. Um, and as a white person and as a person who may be white passing, uh, allyship has to be in the form of you actually saying something when something is happening. Like when you're in a supermarket and you see some cashier, a white cashier, harassing a person of culture, harassing an Asian, Pacific Islander, Oregonian who's just trying to get through their day, you need to be willing to be like, excuse me, I want to speak to a manager. Like, there's this thing going around right now where people are saying that people are Karen because they want to talk to the manager and all that jazz. You need to be a Karen in those situations. We need you to be a Karen. And we don't need you to feel like you need kudos for that. A part of allyship is just doing it, seeing the problems and doing it. I also think that you can be an ally by being informed, by just understanding people's cultures and having culturally competent conversations with people. Learn people's cultures, learn the things that harm them. If there are people in your life that you care about who are from different backgrounds, different cultures, different nationalities, knowing the things that harm them will help you be an ally to them. So you can be there for them when these things happen. And last but not least, because I know we only got so much time, you really need to think of the idea of, I know a lot of white folks have told me about, well, I talked to Jim after the meeting when they said that racist thing to him. And that didn't help Jim because you weren't an ally to Jim in that meeting. You didn't support Jim in that meeting when people were saying racist things. You need to support Jim in that meeting, like, y'all can't talk to Jim that way. Like, no, we need to roll this back. And you're not going to be liked for it. There are going to be some white folks who do not like you calling them out on the things that they have done, the things that they are saying in real time. They're not going to like it. Also being part of an ally is dealing with the fact that some folks ain't going to like you because you said something. And I know for a lot of white folks, that's a really hard pill to swallow because white culture is built in this individualist yet collectivist mindset where you need to be a part of in crowd. But being an ally is not being a part of in crowd. You're just trying to be a decent human being. And that's really what it comes down to. And I saw somebody post be an accomplice. That's a great mindset to have. You want to be an accomplice. And you don't want to be an accomplice in the wrong way. You don't want to be an accessory to someone's pain. You want to be the person who is stepping in and being like, we're not doing that today.
I really appreciate having this conversation and just listening to, all of the things that you have to share. I had no idea that in Oregon itself, hate crimes were up 366%. That statistic is staggering and so scary.
It's really daunting. And it's sad because the beginning of this pandemic, I was in a supermarket and I saw this happen. We were like week 1 of this and it was already happening. I was like, why are you harassing these people? I had to go talk to the manager. And I stood there with these people to make sure they could get checked out. And it wasn't about getting a pat on the back. It was like, they can't even go shopping.
And those are legitimate fears. I mean, like I said, I go to the grocery store or when I go out, I physically and mentally prepare myself for a slur, some action to be taken against me. And again, I think about what this means for my children. My husband is Jewish. I'm Chinese. Like, we are a target in this country, and that's really sad. And I think what's really important is that we educate ourselves and that we educate others, and we take the time to just be kind to one another, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Please, everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, happy Friday, I suppose.
Starting our weekend with action,
But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope everyone stays healthy and is continuing to be kind to one another. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a good weekend.